Good day, everyone, and welcome to Discovering the Stamps of Poland, Part 1. This is a bit of an overview as to what we're going to be talking about today, primarily the Second Polish Republic, as defined in Wikipedia. And this is a description that comes with the map that we will be using today to show you exactly what we're talking about. This is the map of the Second Polish Republic. It existed from 1921 to 1939. And we'll do a little bit of a around the horn, as they say, or around the bases in baseball after an out, because there were a number of other stamp issuing entities that can be found in the late 1910s, early 1920s. You actually see on this picture a red arrow pointing to the Free State of Danzig. And this was an area that was primarily German speaking because it had been part of the Brown area there, East Prussia, and then the Polish corridor to the sea that was guaranteed by treaties after World War I. Going back over to we'll stop here with East Prussia. In this area, there were a couple of plebiscite areas where people were asked to vote. Did they want to become part of Poland or remain part of this German section called East Prussia? Those were done at Allenstein. You can see Allenstein kind of in the lower center. And then the other one was called Marienwerder, and that was area was closer to Danzig. And both of those areas decided to stay with Germany. Now, there is one other area at the very top, Memel, but that is not part of our concern today. That was an occupied area by the French, and most of it eventually went to Lithuania. The next red arrow is what was the stamp issuing entity of Central Lithuania before it became part of Poland. And you see the city of Vilno there. That's now Vilnius after World War II and is the capital of Lithuania, since all of this area on the east side went back to other countries after World War II. And coming south, this is the area that was a stamp issuing entity known as Western Ukraine. And that's listed in the Scott catalog, and you'll note that there are pages available for Western Ukrainian stamps. Okay. The next area we'll look at is the combination of Eastern Silesia and Upper Silesia. And these were plebiscite areas in the late 1910s, very early 1920s, and they ended up being divided between Poland, and some small portions went to Czechoslovakia. There were actually a couple of villages, small towns that Poland had, and there was no plebiscite there, but the Poles realized that 90% of the people living in those little towns were Czech. And so Poland voluntarily gave up those towns, and they were annexed then into what was then Czechoslovakia. Okay, some reasons to collect Poland. Most people will say the attractiveness of the stamps, they're mostly inexpensive. Some of them are commemorating events that happened in Polish history or even modern history. For me, it's those four little words, but wait, there's more. I've collected other countries in Eastern Europe. Most of those are now gone as I downsized a former massive worldwide collection in recent years. But as I call it, the complexity, intricacy, challenge, and just the fun of collecting Poland. I also throw in an old song title here, Up Around the Bend, because you never know what's going to be up the road of collecting from you if you're going to be playing around with Poland. In terms of the language, I do not speak Poland, even though I have a Polish last name. I'm actually third generation born in the United States. The Fisher catalogs that you'll see pictures of later have some translation pages. The phrase book and the dictionary has been very helpful. And some of the pronunciation is intuitive. Cities like Warsaw and Krakow sound close to how they look. However, what looks like the Vistula River is actually pronounced Wisła. For purposes of this program, and apologizing to any Polish speakers who are around, we're going to use the apparent English phonetic pronunciation with a little of my Polish thrown in. This program was originally going to feature the first 50 years of Poland stamps, but if we had gone that route, these are the only stamps you'd see, because this came out in 1860, and 50 years to that is 1910, and there were no other Polish stamps, because until World War I, Poland was still under the partitions that had happened at the end of the 18th century, with Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary, the Habsburgs, splitting up the area. So what we have here are two nice used copies, slightly different shades on the right side. Then we have a picture-perfect mint copy, original gum, 1860 original gum. Okay, we're not sure we're going to believe that. And if you flip the stamp over, somebody put a rubber stamp on it, said fake. So the Scott catalog does note that these issues have been counterfeited. Scott doesn't really give any details, but you will get more details out of the Fisher catalogs, which are the Polish catalogs. During the middle of World War I, Marshal Pilsudski, who was the founder of the Polish Republic, Polish man, was serving in the armies of all three occupying powers, but he was looking forward to at least a semi-independent Poland after the war, no matter who won. There is an excellent exhibit on the Marshal on the Polonus website, and we'll have a link to that later on. This is a card that was sent by Poles serving in the Austrian military, and you can see the Austrian postmark, but also Polish markings on it. Also in 1916, Pilsudski's Polish Legion issued a series of 4 stamps or labels, both perforate and imperforate. These labels are discussed more in the Fisher catalog. Scott does not acknowledge them. The backside of that postcard and the message. Also during the war, local post in Warsaw started issuing their own stamps. They had some approval from the Russians to do this, but then Germany took over Warsaw since they were on opposite sides in World War I. And the Germans were generally okay also, as long as they didn't get too carried away. These are some examples of reprints that were done. And these are examples of proofs on some other Warsaw stamps or labels. Again, it's doubtful that many of these actually did postal duty, and the Fisher catalog in particular warns of counterfeits. Some other local post, this is from, I won't even try to pronounce it. But these are, again, some local issues. These can be found in cheap stamp packets. These were also heavily forged, counterfeited. Zarki is perhaps the best known set of counterfeits. Some of these are actually genuine. Zarki was a town near Krakow where, with the war winding down, the local council had agreed to allow postage stamps to be printed. They used a scene out of Zarki, the town. This is not too far from Krakow in southern Poland. And this has also been heavily forged. One of the telltales on whether or not you have a forgery of a Zarki stamp will center on these 3 figures. If one's touching another, it may be counterfeit. If they're of different heights, it may be genuine. There is a pretty good write-up on Wikipedia about the Zarki stamps, and there are more details in the Fisher catalogs Again, Scott does not recognize these local issues, and the Zarkey issues were in use for only a short period of time. And here we have more fakes, and you can assume fake overprint. And again, these will all be explained in the Fisher catalog. They do make for nice additions to a Polish collection. And some provisional issues on Austrian stamps, again, counterfeited. One just needs to be very careful and cautious if you're going to be collecting some of these provisional issues, Polish Legion issues, all of which came out from roughly 1916 to about 1920. Some provisionals from another town. Okay, just some more, and these are on Germania stamps that were overprinted for what they called the general government. And this is a sample of one of these. It's an overprint on an overprinted stamp on a genuine stamp. So two different overprints on these particular stamps from this town. Also, military courier service began in the Austrian part of Poland, what is now modern-day Poland, near the end of the war. This is mailed from a Polish town, Lvov, and going to Vienna. Flugpost, German for airmail, and then Austrian stamps. But again, we include it here, and it's included in the Fisher catalog on a couple of pages, because these are early airmail stamps coming out from Polish towns. And here's another example of, this is actually Scott 10 through 13, I believe, the first issues, Warsaw Post, but overprinted for general use in Poland. And as you can see, these stamps came out just right after Armistice Day on November 11th. And again, this is another example of Polish Post overprinted on general government. And some of these can be very interesting. There are supposed to be 4 lines lining out German wording. Sometimes there's only 3. Sometimes the lines are in different places. And this is one stamp that was prepared but not issued because Polish definitives had become available. Okay, another example of overprints on Austrian stamps for Polish Post and putting in different values. So this is both an overprint and a surcharge. We'll talk briefly about the plebiscite areas in West and East Prussia. Most of these stamps are in what's called the affordable category, meaning they're cheap. And generally, you can still find them around. Higher values, though, one might want to look at getting expertization, because higher values in both of these plebiscite areas, and that's where the people are voting who they want, which country they want to belong to. And this is just a sample of a cover from Allenstein and was used in the appropriate time period. Swinging down and around, we're not going to include any Western Ukraine stamps in this particular presentation, but we will look at Eastern Silesia briefly, and the Silesia Orientale, pardon my bad French, that's what the SO stands for. And these stamps were in use for only a few months until regular Polish stamps came into being in use. Upper Silesia is another part. I just happened to have found a page that I had saved out. One of the shortcomings of the Scott Big Blue International Part 1, 1840 to 1940, is that they sometimes have countries, one country on the front, different country on the back of the page. And so this is a situation with this page, but this happened to be Upper Silesia, and I just stumbled upon it accidentally in 2024 when we were putting this program together. We'll move in now to authentication of stamps. These are among the Krakow overprints. Scott Catalog warns about counterfeits. Fisher warns about counterfeits. And what we like about this is I'm signed, I'm real, I'm genuine, right? Well, here's the particular postage due stamp, and Zbigniew Mikulski, now deceased, who was a well-known exportiser of Poland stamps, Ukrainian stamps. He says on this, I'm of the opinion that this stamp has a forged overprint. And while I have you on the line, my signature is also forged. So this creates an immediate stumbling block. How do you know what's real and what isn't real on these stamps that are supposedly signed? And all you might have is a sign or a mark on the back of a stamp, but you don't have a certificate. Okay, this is a website that I discovered maybe 15 years ago, Philatelic.fi, which is Finland. And this particular website gives you information about some 2,000 individual stamp experts and what actions they've taken. And it's divided in by name of the exportiser, by country, and then some additional information here at the bottom. This is a really helpful website, especially for Poland. There's one other that we'll put in. This is the Richard Witt Cinderella Reference Collection. Cinderellas meaning labels that look like stamps are commemorating something, but seldom, if ever, did actual postal duty. Now this is going to look at overprints in Lublin or Lvov, which is another city in southeastern Poland at this time. These stamps are signed. And we note that the Scott Catalog warns very vocally about counterfeits of the Krakow overprints, but says nothing about Lublin overprints. And these, again, are on Austrian stamps. And here what we have is Polish Post and the Polish coat of arms inverted on these stamps. Mikulski says, nope, no go, this isn't going to happen. These inverted overprints are forged. However, you can find in the marketplace these overprints that are inverted where they actually are genuine. Again, the wise collector, researcher, student of Polish stamps is going to get your expertization done and just take a careful look at these particular overprints as well as signatures on the back. And this is one we had some fun with. Am I real or am I fake? This is from the city of Gniezno, which is, I think, west of Warsaw. And this was simply a surcharge of 5 groszy, 10 groszy on 2 German Germania stamps. And these have been extensively forged. Here, however, this is the actual American Philatelic Society certificate and says genuine, and one of them has a slight tear at the top, the 5 Pfennig. And here's some additional 5 and 10 overprints on the Germanias, and we caption this, Mikulski is not impressed. He was so unimpressed that he just did one gang certificate for all 5 stamps and said, get these out of my sight, they're fakes, and let's go on to something meaningful. Next thing we're going to look at, though, are the first definitive issues for Poland. These came out in 1919 to 20. These are the issues for northern Poland. The set was done both imperforate and perforate. The reason there are separate issues is that the northern Poland stamps at this time still were using German marks. And then southern Poland did the exact same thing, but they were using Austrian currency for this. And again, sets of imperf and perforated stamps. But wait, remember my 4 little words at the beginning, but wait, there's more. Scott reports 5 different perforation varieties on northern Poland, 4 on southern Poland. Fisher catalog reports 5 of each. Neither catalog talks about paper varieties. And we've got a few samples here of perforations and also paper. Thin paper, different perforations. Grayish thick paper, different perforations. Now, before we leave this slide, we'll make a quick comment. For the most part, these are all very cheap stamps. But the notion that you're going to get sets of 12 for the perforate issues for each perforation, and you're going to capture each paper variety of these cheap stamps is probably impossible. I would seriously doubt that any dealer, even a Polish dealer, is going to carry these. They're going to be impossible to find. And how many generalized Polish collections do you want to buy in order to try to capture more of these? Now, as I was putting this program together in October 2024, I realized that in the collections I have, I've got a lot of these northern Poland and southern Poland definitives. So as I finally get around to assembling my Polish collection into 1 or 2 albums plus a bunch of covers, I'm going to be perfing and looking at every one of these values to see if I can add something that I don't already have and have it in the collection. And this is something off the very first definitive issue. Wanted to have a little fun here, calling creative. On the back of this little sheetlet of 16 stamps, you have a stamp dealer in Warsaw who's advertising his wares. And this is the front side of what that block of 16 looks like. And so this dealer evidently bought Polish stamps, put his little thing on the back, and then as the stamps were used, hopefully a collector would soak them off and go into an album, and then they'd see his advertising on the back. Was it legal according to the Polish Post? Nobody knows at this point in time. I would have to guess no. But he didn't get caught, at least as far as we know. And this is a label based on one of those first definitive issues, but there's no value included here. We're not quite sure what this is all about, but it's obviously advertising of some sort. Okay, getting into actual usage of the first issues, a postcard at the top with an added stamp to it, then coming from different locations, Rono, Warsaw. I might add that I managed to pick up a number of Polish lots from the cherry stone sales that are featuring the Al Kugel military postal history collections. Was a successful bidder of several lots in Kugel number 2. Kugel number 1, I didn't bid Poland, but got some nice Portuguese colonials. This is an interesting piece. It's not a Kugel piece. I got it elsewhere. A letter from the French consul in Poznan to Paris. Poznan was and still is in Western Poland at this time. And there is kind of a rule of thumb in the Universal Postal Union that even if you're a diplomat, unless you're sending something in a formal diplomatic pouch, you have to use the postage stamps of the country where you're stationed. And at one time I had a stamp from the US consul in Zurich, Switzerland going to Indianapolis, and that had Swiss stamps on it. I've got another from an American consul in Mexico going to the US, and that's got Mexican stamps on it. And this is the back side. Next thing we're going to take a look at are souvenir sheets. Poland has issued many souvenir sheets, miniature sheets, combinations of various issues, and continues to do so. But this was the first one, coming out in 1928. I have a mint copy of it, and then a used copy with the stamp show postmarks. Scott notes that this has been forged before. I do not have a copy of the forged souvenir sheet. However, I have seen it. If you ever got one and you put them side to side, the forgery would immediately stand out because it wasn't done very well. And even if you're not an expert in Polish stamps, you can see the difference between the forgery and the real thing. 1937, 3 souvenir sheets issued to honor the state visit of King Carl of Romania. And here's one of them in both mint and used. 20th anniversary of the Republic. The backside of it, a control label in both Polish and French, and then the Zurich, Switzerland receiver. And one thing I'll add here before we get into this particular slide is that I like to collect both mint and used versions of at least the souvenir sheets of Poland, and I'll take regular stamps canceled if I can get them. Some of the more recent ones, and for me, recent is early 1970s. That's where I end my Polish collection. The cancellations and the markings are just very intriguing, especially on the souvenir sheets. This is an area that went to Poland when Germany broke up Czechoslovakia in 1938. I've got a series of postcards that were mailed from various towns in the area that became part of Poland, going almost all of them to Sofia, Bulgaria. As I put, while the collection, whoever assembled the collection didn't say anything about occupation, covers, and cards, one could consider that these are actually Polish occupation of Czech territory. And here's another one here with a receiver stamp in Sofia. Backcountry skiing. And at first glance, somebody might think, oh, this was in Colorado last winter, but it's not. This is near Zakopane, which is a year-round resort town in far southern Poland, south of Krakow. It's down near the border with Slovakia, what is now Slovakia. In fact, Poland and Slovakia share Mount Rysy, R-Y-S-Y, as the highest point of both countries. And this is a look at a skier label that was attached to go with the skier on stamp. And then you also have your Zakopane cancellation. Moving on, we're going to take a look at some other varieties of Polish stamps. Again, remaining in the 1918, basically, leaving out the 1860 stamp for now, but looking at the 1916 to 18 up to 1939 time period. A complete set of this particular semi-postal set on cover may have been a philatelic cover, but definitely went registered and express. And then the 1938 Warsaw Philatelic Exhibition had semi-postal souvenir sheets. Here's a mint copy of the perfed sheet, and then a used copy of the imperforate sheet. And again, showing the markings for the show. And you'll see very quickly here why I like collecting souvenir sheets in both mint and used. Again, because of the postal markings. Zakopane was also a known place for stratospheric balloon flights. 1938 saw a souvenir sheet issued for that very purpose. This is the front of the cover with cachet showing the balloon taking off, and again, Zakopane postmark. This is the back side of the cover showing the souvenir sheet. Poland issued its first airmail stamps in 1925, continues to issue them today. Scott numbers C1 to C9 are on top, and then a commemorative. And then the challenge for 1934 set, Scott catalog references that this issue has been counterfeited but doesn't say anything about them. The genuine stamps are perforated 12.5. The counterfeits here are 11.5. And the Fisher catalog notices some other irregularities and says a little bit about those. But again, the quickest way to determine if you have a counterfeited copy of C1 to C9 is in the perforations. We'll also note that there's a pretty good connection in Polish philately between ballooning and powered aircraft. And here's another one with balloon cachet on it and the stamp doing duty for airmail. And the final cover, a postal card, which also has a label on the lower left. This is for ham radio activity in 1939. Now we'll show you a few scenes. I took these shots in 2010 on a visit to Poland. This is proceeding south on the highway from Krakow to Zakopane. You see the Tatra Mountains rising in the distance. This is Krupoki Street, which is almost a mile long pedestrian mall in the heart of Zakopane. All sorts of neat shops, restaurants, pubs, hostels, hotels. It's an intriguing place just to go people watch if that's all you're going to do at this point in time, if you're taking a day off from hiking in Tatras National Park. Some street musicians, Polish folk culture is alive and well here. And finally, as we get near the end, we'll take a look at the front covers of the Fisher catalogs. This is Tome 1 or Volume 1, which includes all the regular stamps. This is Tome 2, which includes everything else. And if we can zero in on the index a little bit, and then you can see just all the sections of Polish philately that go beyond just the regular stamp issues of regular postage, semi-postals, postage due, newspaper stamps, and airmails. And finally, our acknowledgments here. We appreciate very much the assistance coming from the Philatelic Library's volunteer video team, and especially our videographer, Gary Withrow. And you'll have a little bit of information here about myself.